Hello and welcome back. So let's continue working on our FPS game. And let's first take a look at where we stopped. So by the end of our previous live stream, this is what we got. So we have our launcher, and then we can walk around, launch some bowls. Okay. And now let's make it look something like I posted on the thumbnail of this live stream. So get some more colors into it and get a background. And after that, we will continue moving into adding some more functions for our FPS, for our player. Okay, so to begin with, let's go to our mind map. So in the mind map, we have the ability of changing the background color. So I'll go and change the color to a sky color, and we'll turn on the fog. For fog, set it to 200, and I guess fog and distance at 4,000 probably look good. Let's see. Okay, that looks good. Better than just having gray background. And let's go to our launcher. And I think that our target, our scope, is a little bit too close. I would want it more on the tip of the launcher. So we'll move that. So let's find, where is that? I think 4 probably. Oh, wrong one. Okay, back to 2. So 4. 4. Let's try 5. Maybe 5 is gonna be too far. Yeah, I think 4 will look good. Set that to 4, and then our crosshairs to 4. So move all of that. And to change the color of our launcher, let's use set color. So we don't have to go through all of these and change the color. We can just use the set color, and we'll just use a gray color, something like that. Okay, let's save it. Click play. Okay, so there is our weapon. Now we can use that. Okay, let's now add an explosive barrel. So I did a video on how to make that explosive barrel, and the asset is actually available. So the explosion effect video, and there's the exploding gas barrel. So we can download that and drag it into our scene. And now we have the gas barrel, except it's not in our scene yet. So add that in. Probably want to scale it by 0.5 in the Y direction, so it'll look a little bit taller. Okay. There you go. So we'll place it somewhere here. Let's create some more duplicates of them. Make sure that they're not touching each other. Otherwise, they're going to explode on their own. Okay. And save. Test it out. And there we go. We got our exploding barrels there. And to get those trees in the background, we have some assets in the asset library that Buildbox comes with, and there are some trees right here. We'll use this tree right here, I guess. You also will use a yellow suburb building, and let's add a pickup truck. Let's use this one. So the scale of our house is a little bit small, so we can scale it up. Let's see, 444 looks about right. Can always rotate it a little bit. Put our pickup truck here. Scale it, I think probably 3. 3 looks like a little bit too big. I'll just leave it at 2. And now we can add some trees. So trees, let's scale them up to 5. Okay, that looks about good. Okay. Decent sized tree. We can duplicate him or rotate him for some randomness of look. So get some different rotation, and we can even scale some to make them in different height and length. That always makes a little bit better look and feel. And then you can duplicate a group of them. Rotate it. Duplicate another group. And let's also rotate this one. Okay, and I think one more and we'll be good. Okay, now we can save that. Let's click play. And there we go. So we got ourselves a scene right here. Something that is a little bit more pleasant to look at. So one thing, one more thing that I probably want to adjust is you can see that our scope is nowhere near close to where our ball is being launched. And to change that, we can move our launcher somewhere. So we can move it higher a little bit. Our camera, I think we can move it a little bit lower. So something like that. And it's hard to see where the ball is, so because it's too small. And I think making it bigger won't hurt. So let's actually switch it to be a 4.4 size instead of 0.2. This is gonna be twice bigger, twice as big. Let's preview that. And there we go. That's much closer to the aim. And you can adjust it, making it lower or changing the angle that it's that it's looking at to make it better. So one thing you can see that those cubes are behaving a little bit weird. Like you can see that it's like levitating right now, and that's because of the option that is set by default in static in physics, and it's well, it's actually turned off. So shape always no, this one not always active. So by default it's turned off, and if we enable that, that should make all those objects a little bit more lively. So we won't see any of those levitation. The ball still sometimes goes through those like right there, through those cubes, and the reason why it goes through the cubes is because of the speed that the ball is traveling at. I think you can let's look. So you can subdivide the steps. Let's see if we can make sub-steps. So you can calculate physics twice faster, and that will improve physics calculations, but it also creates a heavier so it just creates more calculation that it does per second. So it might be not something that you're looking for, but the option that's one of the options to increase the physics calculations. Okay, so now as you can see that I have to click and drag for rotation, and I would want to actually just have move the mouse around without clicking, and that use that to move around, rotate around the world. So let's try that. Save that before we go and do that. So by default, okay, so our character is currently being controlled inside by this sphere right here. So by default, the touch rotate is used by on touch. So when you touch, and drag, that's when all the inputs are getting triggered. So if you take a look at the methods that are running, if I can find it. So in here, actually this one is using, I think, the input method that they have here. I think it's older version of it, because if you look at the touch move, it's using the is touch begin. So touch begin, touch move, and touch end. So that's the one that they're using for the touch move. And the input, as far as I know, it's not even supported on mobile. So there's problems with touch rotate that it didn't work for a mobile device. Huh? I thought they actually fixed that, but maybe maybe they got it to work on mobile now. So, but so how it's working here is it checks if has touch, and based on the has touch, it gets the point, which has the current point touch position. Then it uses it to calculate the sensitivity, and the sensitivity is basically multiplies the difference between those. So if you want to make a move sharper, you can change the sensitivity, and this, I think, these right here, the sensitivity is what's being used. And afterwards, so currently we don't have physics, so it's using this portion right here, which is enable entity rotation, add delta scale smooth. So it just adds the delta to our current rotation. And what I want to do is, instead of using this point that is retrieved from the current touch position, I want to actually send an input from a move. So, because the move, mouse move, we have the mouse move, and if we let's actually log the output and make sure that's what we want to use. So use a logger, log that, turn on, and now you can see that the output that we're getting. And I'm hoping that the output is exactly the same as we have for the input current touch position. So just a quick test that we can do is get another input going here. So just in, I guess. And inside the value, we'll check if the name is equal to in. Then what we want to do is create a new variable, and we'll call it we'll just call it pt var pt, and since it's a vector2, we can just use a vector2 of 0, 0. And we need to not forget that. Okay, so now we have the pt, and let's comment out this value, this input that we have there. And what we want to do is actually, when we get the in value, we set pt to that value. So I'm hoping this will be enough to change this whole thing to work with our mouse move instead. So let's connect that to our in. Everything else is the same, and click play, but nothing happens. Okay, so we're still looking for the input has touch signal right here. I probably need to remove that, or let's create a variable that we'll use, so that make sure that the first input we get. So move. We'll call it mouse move, and we'll set it to false by default. And instead of checking the input has touch, we'll switch it to check for mouse move, and we'll set mouse move to true when we get our first value from the mouse move node. So something like that. So by default it's not doing anything, and then once we get our mouse in, it starts moving around. But you can see that our mouse position is not in the center. So wherever we got the mouse in, so if you restart and you start the mouse in the center, then it works. So there we go. Now we can move the mouse around like that. That's still not the perfect way of doing it. Well, I mean, it would have worked if the input, if the mouse would actually wrap around in the preview, but that's not how it works here in this case. So we actually can get off the preview. I'm not sure if we actually get the game on, so export it on PC, if that's going to actually fix that problem and actually allow the mouse to rotate to create that effect. But I guess you can use the approach of a joystick instead. So if you're not in the center, then the character actually moves towards the mouse. So yeah. But it still, this is better than touch moving it and then okay. So we got sort of the rotation to work. Well, using the mouse. Of course, there's lots more improvement that you can do with this. But for now, I think we'll say that's good enough. We can always come back and improve that. So let's save, make sure we save that. And the other feature that I wanted to add, let's see what you guys are saying. What sub-steps? So Al is asking what are sub-steps, and sub-steps are basically dividing how much. I think by default the calculations for physics is set to 30, 40 frames or 60 frames or 30 frames. I'm not sure what they're using. I know that the update is running at 60 frames a second, but for the physics, I'm not sure what are they using for that. So the sub-steps is it divides how that number. So if it's using it's calculating at 30 frames a second, when it's set to 1, if you set the sub-steps, it will calculate another physics between those two steps. So it'll eventually come out to 60 frames a second. And then if you set it to 4, then it'll be calculating 120 frames a second, just the physics. So this two options, the time wrap and the sub-steps, they affect the physics calculations in the world. So if you're actually using move without any physics, so like move node on non-dynamic object, then that asset will actually ignore these settings. So like for instance, like I showed in the previous video, in a previous live stream, you can use a time wrap to make the slow-mo motion. So for instance, if I set it to 0.2, Let's set that to 2. So if I set it to 0.2, if we can see that the movement of our from my launcher is like really fast. And if I actually launch something, and look at that, it's really slow, and the physics of those blocks is like slow. So this is the slow motion, but it only affects objects that are actually using physics. So my movement, it's not in a slow-mo because I'm using just no physics on my movement. So I'm not using dynamic, the player is not in dynamic. So you can see that all of those are affecting it. And it's kind of a problem that it only affects the physics calculation, because look at the barrels. So the barrels are exploding. So they have their explosion, and it's slow-mo, so the explosion is not as fast, but the timer is still the same. So it removed all those exploding particles, just like there's no slowdown in time. So that creates a kind of a problem with the fact that the time wrap only affects the physics objects. So the time is actually not slowed down. That it just changes the physics types. So I don't know. That's like if you're just using everything is in dynamic, like those blocks, I mean, it looks pretty nice and a simple way to set up, but just be warned that there are things that ignore that time wrap. Okay, what else we have? Hey, there is the gun moving when you moving left and right with the mouse. In other words, your character rotates with your free mouse movement. So right now, yes, like I just used the mouse move node. So I'm not clicking, because if I click, it actually shoots. Let me get rid of that time wrap, set it back to 1. So yeah, I move the mouse, I don't click, and if I click, then it's actually shooting a bullet or a ball. For the add a mouse move node, link it to a single invert and add this code. Signal name let rotation new vector equals negative value x 0. For that, add a mouse move node, link the signal invert, and add this code. So on signal, new and set rotation. And then use, yeah. So Vlad, yeah, that's a good idea. Substeps are the amount of tries the physics is calculated, meaning that if you add a small bounce effect and a subset of 2, it will trigger the bounce twice. So yeah, I'm not sure about the substep. That's how it works. Yeah, the substep, as far as I know, the substep, it basically divides how frequent it actually calculates it, because triggering it twice does not really affect it. It's the problem comes into, for instance, when something is flying real fast. If you run physics like once a frame, once a second, the first time it'll register that the position is right here, in a second it might be right flying somewhere right here. So the fact that it went through all these objects, like those blocks, is just gonna ignore. It won't trigger any collisions on those objects. So what the substep does is actually divides it. So it, instead of every second, it will like get triggered here, and then it'll get triggered in the middle, and then triggered again at the end. And basically what it does is divides how frequent it is. So in 0 seconds it's going to trigger, then half a second is going to trigger, and it's going to trigger again at 1 second. So you're basically increasing the frequency of physics calculation. So I don't know. Hopefully that clears it up. That's my understanding of how it works. And yeah, so the rotation, about the using the set rotation from the mouse move, I can't use that technically. Well, first of all, let me see. So yeah, like I can see that it will create absolute rotation position, but I also need the x coordinates. So you can, yeah, I guess you can set it up to rotate in just that direction. Multiply it, because let me see. If I go to a sphere, into my character, the position of it, so the 0, 0 is at the top right here. So that means that my biggest values are 1128 and 634. So that means if I just use the x at the value x, then it will do a basically a not 360, but more closer to a, actually it looks like that's 360. That's weird. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong value. Okay, I'm looking at the y. So it's 1,200 in this direction. So that's three rotations. So it's like 120 degrees. It'll rotate 120 degrees instead of a 360. But yeah, if that's what you're looking for, actually you can use that. You probably will need to offset a little bit. Play with offset, meaning that currently the 0 is somewhere here, and we want it to be in the middle. So you want to offset it by half of the rotation, and then also scale it down so it will be one rotation across. So when you do a swipe, it actually does a 360, unless you want to do two rotations instead. But yeah, that's Vlad, that's a good approach actually to do a rotation too. How to give the character a tool like a hand that always carry. Tool like a hand that always carry it. Always carry. I have a sword with a physics that will be used to destroy the enemy. So physics. My understanding is if you have a sword, then the sword, well, actually we're not specifying which physics is used, but yeah, the sword would, I would use kinematic physics for a sword, because you don't want the effect of the sword, the collisions of the sword to actually change. I think that will create a lot of problems. So I would use a kinematic physics for the sword. And yeah, you can place it exactly like I placed it here. So you have just the character. So the in case someone missed how I created that, so I have the character, which is a sphere. Technically, for first person, you don't actually see the character. You can probably you might see his hand or something like that, but to get to make it easier to create the rotation and the movement and allow the freedom of position your tool. So for instance, our launcher, there are the launcher is actually a child of the character, and that's what I would do with a sword too. So it's a child. The effect of the effect of the character, the movement and the rotation of the character will affect the position of the of our gun, but we can also on top of that have effect of our gun also. So for instance, we actually can add like recoil effect or something like that on our when we launch. So let's try that out. Didn't try that before, so I think I'll use a rotation animation. Rotation animation for that. So not sure which one's going to be the best one for that, but I guess I'll just leave it at default. So on spawn, so once the bullet is actually fired, let's trigger animation, and we want to rotate it in the x-axis. I think that will be, and we can 90 is a bit too much. Let's do let's start with like 5 degrees. Make sure that it is set to is delta. I'm not sure if it's going to be positive or negative. The duration probably 2.2 second, which is 200 millisecond, and then we can move it back in 0.3. So in the back is -5 degrees. Make sure that it's positioned back at where it started. So let's try that out. Save it before we destroy everything. Okay, so you can see that effect right there. And it's not like that's possible because of how our character is set up. So since our tool is on its own, it can have its own functions, and it's not affecting the character. So on top of that, I can actually move the tool without actually moving that character. So really good good approach with that. I put it as a child under my character in the in it follows it, but I'm controlling the sword with a joystick, and the rotation is missing out when the child the character is. Any idea? Is there any way to see if to receive and are true? So to receive are true. I want to see check if they are both are true to do some task. I tried all of the signals but could not find something that passes with both are true. Okay, that's a separate question. So so you're controlling the sword with a joystick. Child under my character in. Okay, I put it as a child. My character in it follows it, but I am controlling a sword with the joystick, and the rotation is missing out when it is the child of the character. Any idea? So what do you mean you're controlling it with a joystick? The sword? You're controlling the sword with a joystick? And why are you controlling the sword or the joystick? What I'm not clear on what type of gameplay you have there. Well, not gameplay, but what you're trying to do with the joystick and the sword. Because if you're if the movement the movement of the character, the rotation and the movement of the character, I have it in the character, and the tool on its it moves on its own. So for yeah, so I'm not sure the joystick rotation, what you're doing there. So if you can clear up what's going on there. Okay, Vlad, yes, I think you're right. Okay, hello. Yes, you'll be able to, I guess. Anonymous Hack is asking if there's going to be a replay. Yeah, I usually leave those up, the live streams up, so you can come back and see them if you missed something. Okay, so it's a 3D game, and I'm rotating the sword with a joystick. So rotation, I'm not sure if that's what you're getting into a issue with, but basically the rotation, if you have a sword, the position of the sword inside of the sphere, no, shouldn't affect it. Yeah, I'm not really clear what's rotation missing. Joystick, and the rotation is missing out when it's a child of a character. Any idea? So yeah, I'm not I still can't see what you're doing, but basically how rotation works. So there is a rotation on this object, and then there's also rotation on the child. Now the child rotation is not affected by the character rotation. So if well, no, what I'm saying is the actual rotation variable in the child does not change based on the rotation of the character. It actually looks like it's rotating with the character, and it's rotating in the world with the character, but the values of the rotation of this entity or asset is actually is still 0, 0 unless you changed it. So that's why I was able to create this effect right here. And it's a rotation animation. I was able to create that because it's separate from the child. Separate from the character, and so on top of the character rotations, I can actually add rotation to the child. I think that's a lot of confusion there. Okay, let's try something new. So if you can state clearly what you're trying to do, well, like what you're trying to achieve by rotating the sword with the joystick, I might give you a solution for that. Okay, what about the receive? So receiving, having receive nodes that will fire true if both of them are true. So with that, that's a little bit. So let's actually set that up and to show you what's going on. So when you have two receive nodes, they will never fire at the same time. So one will fire and then another one will fire. So you can't really use any existing nodes to achieve that. you can create your own node, and how that would look is basically the node that you create needs to wait for both signals to come in before it decides if both of them are true or false. So it's not not that complicated to create. So let's actually, so you'll need a new script. You need probably 3 inputs. So you need your input 1. Why I just ignored I guess the I is pretty small. So input 1, and then we have input 2. The third one, I would use it for reset in case that one receive node never actually gets sent, or you decide to reset, you want to clear the values. So you connect that, and no spot, misspelled reset, so something like that. And in here, you want to have 2 variables. So variable for signal 1, and what shall we use? Let's just use in1, and we'll leave it, we'll set it to null. By default it is set to null, but I just to make it clear to see. So, well, it's null or undefined, I'm not sure which one it is. And in here, so what you want to do is if the signal, so here you would check if it's in 1, so the signal of in 1, and you want to make another check. Well, actually first let's set the value to the in1 value. So we'll set the value there. And the second thing is we'll check if the in2, well, we need to check first that it's not null. Well, actually, we can check just if, well, yeah, not null. Better to check that. And then we can check if it's actually in2. So if you're just looking for both of them to be true, and you don't care about the false signals that get that you receive, you can just do that. In fact, you can remove that check for null. You would want to check for null only if you want to do something with false signals too. So if you want to just have an output when there is both of them are true, then you can do this. And here, inside here, you would use this that emit signal, and then specify the signal name. We'll just, okay, I think I messed up the lowercase, so it needs to be uppercase N. So the signal, and since we're since we're only doing it if it's true, we can just do it true. Another thing that I missed was the value of can be false, and that we get in can be false. So we want to actually check here for the in1 also. So in1. So in1 is true and in2 is true, then we emit the signal. And we can also do the same thing for in2. So something like that. The reset, so else, let's set a reset. The logic for reset, you just want to set the initial values back. So in I guess I like copy pasting. So you just set it back to the default value. So in1 is null and in2 is also null. And you want to do the same reset for if you actually emit it. So if you emit a signal to the out, you want to reset it back so that the previous values will not affect your next input values. So something like that. Okay. I don't think I made any. Okay, there's my error right there. So I need to make sure that I switch to in2 instead of in1. That's an issue of copy pasting. Sometimes you miss some variables. Okay, so this right here, that should make it work. And the last piece that we're missing is an output out. So this is the node that you're looking for. Was that clear enough? Like did you guys understand what's going on here? If there's something that you don't get, you can always ask like in more details. I'll be glad to go in details and show you more details about that. Let me actually create a new asset and export it so I can actually post it in the resource channel of my Discord. So rename it to something. So where is it? So this is the script that I just created. So go to the cube, paste it in, and it's not, you can use it not just with a receive. Any two values that you want for them to be true, for some task to do some task, you can use these two nodes. I mean this node right here. We'll name it if both true. I think that's a reasonable name. Okay, and both true. Export asset. So if you want to get that asset, you can find it on the resource in my Discord server under Discord. Okay, so that one is up there. Let's actually test to make sure it works. So for testing, I guess you can use keyboard inputs. Let's use keyboard inputs. And we'll use the pressed option. We'll check for, let's do T and the other one Y. And if both of those keys will be pressed, then we will switch the color to, I guess, green. This sounds fine. So T and Y, and you can see there our color changed. So if I click T or Y, it doesn't do anything. But if I click T and Y together, hold them down, then it changes to green. So that's a demonstration of how to use that. Okay. Okay, so back to our FPS. No more questions. So let's go and... So I want to add the ability of jumping. So that's... that will require us to switch our character to be dynamic. And I'm just thinking, what's the best way of doing that? Because like I said before, like there's a lot of things that I don't really like how the move node and rotate node start behaving once you switch to the dynamic mode. But for jump to work, we'll need to switch it to a dynamic, unless we want to create our own calculations for physics, which I don't really want to do. So if we switch to dynamic, we launch it, you can see that our game just, yeah, goes crazy. And so the first problem is with the physics. So for physics, I think we can use physics and nulls. Just set that we don't have physics, and that's interesting. So we got kind of that sorted out, right? The rotation still works, but the problem is with move. So right now, if I start moving, yeah, the movement is just not what I want it to be. And let's actually try using the same approach of setting the physics to null here and see if we can get away with that. So there is our physics set to null. We still move. Seems like okay. So need to do the same thing for that node. And let's just do this one as well. If we can get away with just turning off the physics calculations for the move, I think we'll just leave it at that. So we can walk. Follow rotation is still working. Okay, seems all fine. And now it's time to add a jump node. For jump, we'll use a keyboard button space. Let's add that in. Space. And on press, we will jump. Okay, jump limit is set to 1. Let's leave it at that for now. So there seems like some things get misaligned. So I guess that's a quick way of doing a jump, but as you can see that there is some problems with it, and I think it's due to the fact with angular angular velocity. So because of the angular velocity, the rotation like shifts and it gets changed based on the position of the mouse or something like that. Okay, so as you can see that the gravity is really weak, and it's because of the scale of our character. Our character is pretty big, so we need to increase the scale of and we need to increase the gravity to compensate for the fact that our character is huge. So let's see if we can jump on those blocks. Well, yeah. So we want to lock the rotation. We want to lock rotation of our character. This boss. So if you want to use this gun in 2D, you'll have to recreate it, because it's a lot simpler to make the gun working in the 2D game than in 3D. So there's lots more things that going on in here. So, but the idea of the gun is exactly the same. So you'd have your character, and then the character would, well, since you're probably going to use a sprite, your character with a gun. I don't know if you'll have a child, a gun as a child of the character. That's your decision to make, but you'll have to recreate it. And the fact that you're just going to be rotating on the z-axis instead of we were rotating on the y-axis and the x-axis for our gun to work. Okay, I forgot to remove this. And we can turn that off. And I wanted to freeze the rotation on the Z. So set, oh, not scale. Rotation factor of Z. I'll set it to 0 because we don't want the character to rotate that way. So let's see if we can. Okay, so now we can jump on those cubes, kind of. And since we're the collision shape is a sphere, we can still rotate. So for collision shape, I'd probably switch to use a cube instead of a sphere. So let's find that cube. So something like that. That's interesting. Okay. So yeah, the angular rotation is still, even though I locked the rotation, there's still some angular rotation that is changing. But yeah, like I said, that enabling dynamics with the move and rotation in the 3D world, it kind of creates some problems. So you can take a look at so it ends up like you want to create one node that will be able to control all of that at one place. So all your jump logic, your rotation, and your move to be in one node, so that they can communicate between each other and to see what to solve. How to have a smooth move into D platform when we are in the air and we want to move. Go to or right. Moving the character in the air is not smooth, and it stays in the air when we move it. So please do a haptic feedback node at the end, please. I did a haptic feedback node in the previous video live stream. So, and you have been asking for multiple times. So I'm not sure if I missed something that you're looking for in the haptic feedback. So if there's specific something that you're looking for, just let me know. Okay, so smooth move. Moving the character in the air is not smooth. It stays in the air when we move it. Okay, so I'm not really sure of what movement you're talking about. So in the move node, so are you talking about like the acceleration? So when you change direction, instead of it instantly switching to another, you go in the opposite way, it actually has some time for it to slow down and then go back. Is that what you're referring to? Smooth move? Because the camera has the follow force that you can use for smooth follow, but smooth move, yeah, I guess you're referring to the fact that when you use a move node, it instantly switches to another value. It just ignores the previous movement. And yeah, to do that, you'll need to write some of your own code. So if you do have a jump ability, that means that you're probably using dynamic physics, because jump enables dynamic physics by default. And the direction, so the velocity, is calculated right here. To make it smooth, instead of you can see right here that it just sets the linear velocity exactly to what it should be. But if you want to make a smooth change, instead of switching it, not this one. So yeah, if you want to change direction, you would want to look at the current linear velocity and slowly transition to a new linear velocity. So for that, since these are vector, the velocity is a vector 3. If we take a look, let me see. If we take a look at the documentation, so it's for the helper class, and under vector 3, combine a jump and a move node into D, but when I jump, it does not land smooth. It stays in the air. I'm assuming the X force is greater than the Y force in my case. So yeah, if it stays in the air, I think the issue with that, I'm not sure, but usually if it stays in the air, that means you didn't remove the 0 in the move node. So make sure that that 0 is not in the move node. Then the calculations for the jump and the physics will not be conflicting with the move node, because when you set it to 0, as I showed in here, that that set linear velocity gets set to that. So if it's set 0 here, it will be constantly resetting the velocity of your character to 0. So your character is going to be floating at Y once you trigger the move node. So yeah, make sure you remove this 0, and once you do that, the check is right here. So if speed Y equals is not null, then it only then it uses the Y. It uses the adjusted value, so it actually changes the value. Otherwise, it just sets the velocity Y back, so it just keeps the velocity, linear velocity for that axis what it was before, which is really important for a jump node. Like when you're using jump node and the y-axis, the move should not touch the y-axis basically, unless you're like climbing. In that case, you can change, you can use the y-axis for that purpose, but you need to make sure that once you're done climbing, you need to switch it back to a move node that does not have, basically to turn off that move node that was setting the y to that value. So if that's the case, then that's the way. I'm not sure if I could ask for that or not, but can we get a grappling hook BB doc earlier with the current video likes count? Yes, I'll get it earlier. So I still haven't finished. There's one issue that I need to solve with it. It's the fact that the linkers, what was it? How the linkers were attached to the objects themselves. So we have the issue that I had right now with the current version is that when you have multiple scenes, it actually ignores the other objects in the next scene. So it only looks at the objects that are in the current scene, and that's basically how Buildbox is working. And so I do have a way I can work around that. I just didn't get a chance to fix that yet. So as soon as I'll fix that, I'll upload a BB doc and also do a quick tutorial of how to set it up and how to use it. So is it possible to add a distance counter in Buildbox 3? So distance counter. So I'm not clear about the distance because, like, score type, if you go to project settings, they have the score type and there's coin collection, point collection, global distance, global coins, global points. So they have distance here and global distance, but for displaying for UI, if you try to display that in UI, so UI screen, and you do default font for score type, I don't see distance here. It's just points or coins, and I'm not really clear on what do they mean distance, because there's distance for path, and if you're using paths in your game, there's path distance, and also distance. Not sure what's the definition of distance there. Let me check the API for maybe there's some more clarification about that. So distance of the camera, no scene API, current distance. Okay. Vector 2, 3, subscene, API reference. Linkers. Yeah, I'm not really seeing. So I'm not sure what distance is. So that's a question. That's a good question to ask on Buildbox, Buildbox Discord, and find that out. What's distance and how it's used and how it's calculated? Because the option right here for score type, this is what's used for leaderboard. So right here, these are the options that you have for a leaderboard, what type of score you're using if you're setting up leaderboard. Okay, so the linear interpolation for two vector threes to get smooth transition, not okay. So yeah, I started I thought that's the question, what the question was, but I guess I'm assuming that the problem was with the fact that y wasn't set to 0. Okay, so for the interpolation of two vector threes, so if you go to vector helper class, inside here you have the vector 3, and under vector 3, excuse me, there is the lerp right here. That's not the one I'm looking for. So yeah, there's not that great of a documentation here about that. So lerp, oh no, actually, yeah, never mind. That is what I'm looking for. So you can use the lerp function. Let me go back here, and for our character. So let's remove that, and inside here, I'll just paste that in. So what you need is right here, it overrides the velocity, and we want the not the overwritten velocity first to compare with the new velocity. Wait, where do I want? Okay, I actually want it after the follow rotation. So right here. So we'll get the linear velocity again. So let's call it C velocity for current velocity. And what we want to do is do the lerp. So, and we'll say velocity equals, and we'll use the C velocity and lerp it to velocity, and the alpha is basically the how smooth you want the transition, and we'll use, let's try 0.4. Start with that. So make sure we save it, and this will affect the movement in our game. It's going to affect the movement forward and back. Let me make sure that I turn off dynamic, because why is it working? Okay. So it's actually hard to see the effect of it. Let's try. Let's try increasing decreasing the value to 0.1. Still can't see that effect. Okay, let's really decrease it. I don't know. It seems like it's hard to see it. Probably should do it in another demonstration. Wait, I'm not doing. It looks like I'm doing the opposite. No, I think that was correct. Okay, so let's try that in another example. I think would be easier to see if our camera was not following our character. So let's copy that code that we just created, and well, first of all, we need to comment this out. Come on, comment it out. Comment that out, and then we'll open it in we'll open a new we'll open a new 3D game. So 3D template. So for our cube, inside here, we'll just use 2 move nodes. Well, actually, let's use a keyboard move and use XY to move it in, well, let's use, yeah, to move it in the X position. So 5, make sure we switch it from, okay, I'm actually I was changing the dynamic, the velocity of a dynamic object. No, that's why it didn't work. Okay, so actually the code that I was shown was changing this dynamic physics, and as you remember, I turned off the dynamic physics for my character in the FPS. So right here, if our dynamic physics is turned on, and we can go, okay, I guess my code is lost. Okay, so here it is. So we're just gonna decrease that lerp to 0.1 instead, and we're moving in next direction. So there you go. There's the movement. So it's I think, let me see. Switch it to landscape so we can see the cube better. Okay. Full HD. So let's compare the nodes. So if I do just a move node with without anything, so 5, right? Okay, and I do that right now. Refresh. So that's how it looks. And if I use the lerp, you can see that it does have that smooth effect. So for if you want even a more noticeable effect, I think setting it to 0 probably show that a little bit more. So see, like it's barely starting actually. So maybe 0.4 or something like that. You can tweak those values. So that's basically how you would do the smooth effect. Just the lerp function that comes with vector 3, and the vector 2 has also has the lerp function. So if you're doing it in 2D, which I think 2D still works with vector 3, the position is still a vector 3. Okay, so that's that. By distance, I mean that that in the game interface, the player can see how much distance he has traveled. That is what I'm trying to add in the twisted road template. In the twisted road template, it has a coin counter by default. However, when I am looking for it to add a counter with distance, so again, like there's the coin counter, there's a score counter. So let's choose a template, go template to twisted road. So the path itself has the distance, but you'll need the code to retrieve that. Let me see. So path width. Position X. So let's go to the documentation, and I'm not sure where the path stuff is. So under script, nope, not here. Nodes, not here. Scene, so it might be under scene. So there's the path. But okay, so scene path right here. Here's the. So the scene path, what it has is the path position. So it returns the current path position. The path position is simply how far along of the path the game has moved. So this is probably the value that you would look for, and you would display that. Actually, yeah, well, there's support for, okay, so wait, the path position, and you can find the path inside the scene. So you need to go to this.scene.path and then path position. So let's actually set that up right now. Let me check, so set label, what's a UI, set UI text, and it uses the UI text name. So dist, let's use name dist for that, and we'll okay, so that's the new text. Then we'll need a script. And this script, what's gonna do out, this script is gonna run every update, and we will pass out, so this dot, and no, we're not, so we're looking for the scene dot path, and okay, it's a function also, but so that should give you the distance of the current path, and we want to emit, so this dot emit, okay, signal, and we are emitting to out. The value is the position. Okay, that's that, and connect that to the set UI. And since we need a UI UI text, so dist for a UI text, let's go to our game. So this is our game UI, and inside here, let's add another default font, and we'll name it dist, something like that. Click play. 1080, and there's your distance right now. So that's pretty much how you would set up distance, and you're using the distance of the path the path, basically path class or path node or component. I don't know what they referred to as. Okay, so that is that. Let's go back to our FPS game. So that's I think I'll leave this like this for now. I think to make more improvements, you basically need to create a custom script that will keep calculations for all of the rotation and movements. So to actually have more control of it, because there is definitely some stuff that going on that I don't like. I'll post this updated part 2, I guess, part 2 of this FPS game. If you want to check it out and do your own improvements, I'll post it on the resource on Discord. And yeah, I'll guess this the end of this live stream. Thank you for joining me and asking all the questions, picking my brain. So there's still no reply about the haptic feedback node. I guess I can show it again. So that I think I still have it inside here. So if under the gun, this script right here, that's pretty much all you need to do to add haptic feedback. And you just add inside the signal, you just add this line of code, system set send haptic feedback, set it to 1, and then you just create any input that can be triggered from from any node that you want. So any value that you'll pass in send will actually trigger the haptic feedback. In your previous live, you explained how to add timer for draw. How can I show the timer as a bar in my UI? Timer. Did I actually use the timer node there? I'm trying to remember. Timer as a bar in my UI. Could you explain how to implement an actual value for the timer? So I don't remember already like what I used for the timer. So if well, yeah, I think I used a delay or a timer. So if both of them, no, you use the delay. So okay, if I use the delay, you can easily replace it with the timer. The difference is that the timer will do the same thing if you set the number of events to 1, and that will make sure that there's only one timeout that gets fired, and that's it. So you can this is basically a replacement for a delay. Of course, the delay has more stuff, which means it's will be more efficient. But so you can replace the delay with a timer node, and the timer node actually has the time value. So that's an addition that it has, and you have the output. So right here, you can specify which type of output. So if you want to get a fraction of a second or seconds, or in minutes, seconds format. So you can choose any of these formats and get the value out that way. So it will display. In fact, let me, so as far as I know, I have a So for instance, I have, let's add a timer here, timer label. And in here, so on start, I'll enable the timer and a timer value. So set text, set UI text right there. So you connect it to the time value. And if you want to, so the label that I used was timer. The time value, if you want to just display the seconds, and for instance, let's say 10 seconds that you have for the timer, you have the option of reverse. If you don't set it reverse, it's going to be counting up. Why is it not counting? Timer, okay. See, everything seems correct. Okay, let's see. Let's log it and see if we can make sure that we're actually getting the value out of this timer. So we're getting the log, but for some reason unless I'm rewriting it with something else. Let's see. Okay, that's because I switched it to score. So switched back to use text, and you can see when it's just when you don't specify reverse, it's actually counting up. And so we'll remove the logger. So if you want to count down, you just click reversed, and that will start from 10 and start counting down. And once it reaches 0, you can trigger something. Now, did it just go into the negative? Oh, -0. I guess that's a value. Okay, so you can see it counts down. Counts down, and you can use the timeout to trigger that. I think was stop input that I added to the draw node. So you can use this timeout to trigger the stop node. If you want to create a bar, now that's a little bit more complicated, I guess, to make. Unless, yeah, if you want to make a smooth bar. It's a bit more complicated to make. You can make like a bar that is steps by every second. To make an actual bar, you would want to reuse. I would go and reuse the progression asset for the template. So inside of So let me remove this. So in the progression template, let's save it. In the progression template, there is a good demonstration of, well, basically is the approach that you would take to do the bar. So this is the start label, the end label, and you're looking for the bar. So the background, you can see this is white, and actually it's not white, isn't it? Black. Yeah, it's black. So you can see that background, and then the bar is actually the red bar. And that's and how it creates that effect is by scaling it, and also offsetting the position of it, because if you scale it, it'll be just scaled in the center. So you need to actually also offset the position to set it there. And you can take a look at the code for that. how it works right here. So this, the 2.88 is the magic number, which is basically has to do with the length of the image, the bar image. So if you import your own image with different size, you would want to change that. But basically that's the two values that are getting calculated, and the values are being calculated on based on a value, which is percentage. And in here you would get your max time. So here, like if you had 10 seconds, you would have 10 seconds here. And on this side, instead of path position, you would use the input. So in the signal, you would get the value. You would get the value from the timer node and put it in here. Now, the problem, well, basically, the value that you would want to export it as a fraction of fractional seconds. So that's going to actually return a decimal point number, which is going to give you that smooth bar movement. So take a look at that. So this template is using distance, so the path position, to fill that in. And in your case, you would want to use, instead of path position, you want to use the signal, the time. So create an input, time, then you pass in the time value here. Inside here, I would create a if statement followed by the else if. And the if statement is going to check for name equals time. And what we're looking for is basically the well, I guess we can just call it time. So we'll you have to start with the time, and I guess let's create a time max variable also equals 10. So 10. You start with that. On the time input, you would want to set time to equal to the value that you get. You get the value that way. And now inside here, you use the time over time max. And since, in this case, so in this case, if you want the scale to decrease, so actually get smaller, you would use the reverse. So it starts with 10 and then the bar actually is decreasing. So let's try that out. Hopefully it's not crashed. So you can see that the bar is decreasing, and oh, it stopped because it didn't survive for 10 seconds. So, and continues to move. So you can change the time to 5 seconds instead. Let's go to R. So set 5 here. And there is our 5 seconds delay. You can see that it's moving much faster. And once it's done, you have to stop. Oh, well, it's because, I haven't set the number of events to 1. So that should. So yeah, once the time runs out, it's empty, and you can trigger your game over from here. Yeah, I didn't think of going through and actually creating this, but there we go. That's basically how you create a bar using the timer. Okay, I think that wraps it up. So thank you very much for watching and for asking questions, and I hope you guys found this very helpful, and we'll see you later. Bye.